Have you ever noticed something strange? As you grow more self-aware, as you understand your patterns, as you become calmer, clearer, more grounded, some people don't move closer. They move away. The warmth fades. The ease disappears. The connection feels thinner than it used to. Nothing dramatic happened. No argument. No betrayal. You didn't reject them. You simply stopped abandoning yourself. And somehow, that was enough to change everything. This experience can feel deeply unfair. You were trying to heal, to understand yourself, to become more conscious, not more distant. Yet instead of deeper connection, you encountered silence, awkwardness, or emotional withdrawal. It hurts because it feels unearned. You may start questioning yourself. Did I become too serious? Too intense? Too different? You replay moments in your mind, searching for what went wrong. There's a quiet grief in realizing that some relationships only felt safe when you were less aware, less honest, less whole, when you were more accommodating, more emotionally available than you should have been, more willing to overlook your own discomfort. You may miss the closeness, even while knowing that closeness required you to stay smaller. Growth gives clarity, but clarity often comes with loss. And one of the most painful losses is realizing that not everyone can stay with you as you evolve. According to Carl Jung, self-awareness is not just insight, it is a structural shift in the psyche. Most people live primarily through what Jung called a persona, the social mask formed to meet expectations, maintain harmony, and avoid inner conflict. The persona keeps life predictable. It keeps relationships stable. It prevents uncomfortable questions. When you become more self-aware, you loosen your identification with this mask. You no longer react automatically. You no longer mirror emotions to keep peace. You no longer say what's expected just to be liked. Your presence changes, even if your behavior does not. You become quieter, but more precise. Calmer, but less performative. Present, without needing approval. This shift creates psychological tension. Why? Because self-awareness does something unsettling. It exposes avoidance, not through confrontation, but through contrast. Your calm highlights others' inner chaos. Your honesty reflects what they suppress. Your stillness invites reflection, and reflection threatens defenses. Most people are not consciously avoiding themselves. They are simply surviving. When your presence interrupts that survival strategy, discomfort arises. And rather than turning inward and asking, what is this bringing up in me? The psyche protects itself. Distance becomes safer than awareness. Withdrawal becomes easier than self-examination. They don't pull away because you are wrong. They pull away because something inside them has been touched. This is where many people lose themselves again. They mistake distance for rejection. They soften themselves to restore closeness. They dull their awareness to regain comfort. But Jung warned that returning to unconsciousness for belonging fractures the self. Here is a turning point. You realize that distance is not always abandonment. Sometimes it is information. It shows you which relationships depended on you staying unconscious, which connections required you to overfunction emotionally, which bonds existed because you were willing to ignore your own truth. This realization is painful, but liberating, because it frees you from trying to grow while keeping everything the same. Growth always changes compatibility. Always. Not everyone who loved who you were can love who you are becoming. And that is not cruelty. It is reality. There's a phase that almost no one talks about. It comes after you understand what's happening, but before you feel fully at peace with it. This is the in-between. You are no longer who you were, but you are not yet fully settled into who you are becoming. According to Carl Jung, this stage is one of the most psychologically demanding parts of individuation. The old structures have dissolved, but the new ones have not yet fully formed. Externally, it can look like quiet isolation. You notice fewer messages, less emotional reciprocity, more space than you're used to. Not because you push people away, but because you stop holding relationships together by force. This phase feels lonely not because you lack connection, but because you are no longer surrounded by distraction. Silence increases, and in that silence, you begin to meet yourself more fully. This is where many people panic. They mistake the absence of affirmation for failure. They assume something is wrong. They consider returning to old patterns just to feel familiar warmth again. But Jung believed this loneliness is not abandonment. It is incubation. The psyche is reorganizing. You are learning to sit with yourself without immediately reaching outward. You are discovering what remains when validation is removed. You are building an inner stability that no longer depends on reaction. This is not comfortable, but it is sacred because this is where self-trust is forged. You learn to hold your own uncertainty, to soothe your own doubt, to remain present without needing confirmation. The loneliness does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are no longer anesthetized by approval. And slowly, often imperceptibly, something begins to change. You feel less urgency to be understood, less fear of being misread, less attachment to how others respond. Not because you stop caring, but because you stop collapsing inward when connection thins. This middle phase teaches you something essential. You are capable of standing alone without becoming isolated. And once you learn that, you are never the same again. Eventually, something settles inside you. You stop chasing the warmth that disappeared. You stop explaining yourself to be understood. You stop shrinking to maintain fragile connections. Not because you become indifferent, but because you become integrated. You begin to see discomfort differently, not as something to fix, not as something to manage, but as information. It tells you where honesty is unwelcome, where awareness is resisted, where depth feels threatening. You learn to trust this signal. Your presence no longer asks for permission. It no longer defends itself. It no longer performs. It simply exists. And that existence carries quiet authority, not authority over others, authority within yourself. You are no longer responsible for regulating other people's inner worlds. You are no longer compelled to soothe discomfort that is not yours. You understand something essential. Not everyone will stay close as you become more self-aware. And that is not a flaw. It is a natural consequence of becoming real in a world that often prefers comfort over truth. You stop shrinking. You stop hardening. You stop performing. You remain. And those who can meet you do. Those who cannot move away. This is not loss. It is alignment. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of what is truly yours.